Sarah Khan, the government's commissioner for countering extremism, thinks the government was too slow to respond to the LGBT row outside schools in Birmingham. But I want to know, what should the government have done? And also, does this make you feel like religious rights don't matter? Has it made you at all reevaluate your faith when it comes to LGBT matters? Please welcome my What's God Got to Do With It panel guests, Imtiaz Shams, founder of Faith to Faithless, also Kirtan Chagh, a devout Hindu, and also Aya Badawi, a practicing Muslim. Hello to all of you. How are we?
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So, Imtiaz, I'll start with you first of all. Should the government have done more, do you think, to deal with this row?
Absolutely. I think the government is afraid of the political issues and how tangled stuff like this is. And I think we're seeing so many cases of bigotry across the spectrum. I was on this show, I was on a BBC Asian network 4 months ago, and they were asking me, is it okay that non-Muslim parents wanted to pull their kids out of Islam classes? And I said, no. I said, that's ridiculous. And it's the exact same response here. It's ridiculous. Why is the government kind of, footing around this topic when they should be straight up saying, no, this is what we teach. This is how we create an integrated society. Instead, they're kind of being a little bit afraid and being slow and all that kind of stuff. I mean, recently they have come back a bit stronger, but it's taken a long time.
Is that fair to say that they're almost pandering to religion a little bit? What are your thoughts on this, Kirtan?
I'm not too sure we should just let the government or have that mindset that, okay, the government set this in stone, so we should be following it, right? Fine, what they're teaching and what the government's given to the schools to teach is a curriculum, but it shouldn't be forced on everyone to learn. The kids aren't in a position to make a choice at that point to say, all right, this is what I want to learn. But the parents should be allowed to, choose whether or not their kids are able to learn this, right? Not everyone wants to learn about this, and it's not. I don't feel like it's mandatory for them to learn it either. So fine, the government has, put down a curriculum and they've said, all right, you have to learn about relationships, you have to learn about same-sex relationships, this, that and the other. But I don't feel like it should be enforced upon everyone. It should be a choice.
Why do you think it should be that? Because this is the government's decision. The government, they themselves say, the guidance for schools says teaching should be with respect to the backgrounds, beliefs of pupils and parents. And they said that the parents should be consulted about what was taught, but they wouldn't have a veto. And also, Damien Hines, who's the secretary, as education secretary, said, we want children to grow up understanding that some people are different, some relationships are different, and from what they might have experienced, but all are valuable. And that also, they trust individual head teachers to determine how and when and to address what can obviously be sensitive subjects. There's nothing unreasonable in what the government have said there, is there?
No, nothing unreasonable. And what they're doing, to be fair, is a good thing, right?
So shouldn't children be able to learn different things?
That's what I mean. That's where it comes in for the parents and the children, right? So the parents might feel that we don't want our children to have that awareness about what's going on in society today. Stuff like this, right? Stuff like same-sex relationships. Some parents might feel that, religiously we don't want our kids to learn about this, right?
Would that apply if, let's say, we were teaching kids about, what Asian people went through in this country? I mean, if there were schools with just white people and a full UKIP majority, and they were trying to take the kids out because the kids are taught about the fact that we exist, would you say the same thing?
I think I'll say the same thing for anything, to be fair.
Let's bring Aya in on this. What are your thoughts? Where do you sit on this?
Well, for me, it's all about tolerance and respect. And, to answer your question, has it made me reevaluate my faith? The answer is no, because my faith teaches me to tolerate and respect all. So in that sense, I think it's, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak from that perspective. I think, children should be should be taught about the real world. And I think, as parents, you can't really put your children in a bubble and, just think that they're not going to be exposed to anything. At the end of the day, the onus is on the parents and the responsibility is on the parents to articulate it in an informed manner. You can say, yeah, okay, the religion says this about that, but that does not ever give you the excuse to ever disrespect someone or be intolerant of someone, because homophobia is on the rise. And we all saw what happened to that couple in London, and it was only when they put it on the front news of the newspaper did people actually think it was real. I've witnessed people being, victims of homophobia on the streets. And, it's at the end of the day, prejudice is prejudice, and we can't pick and choose who to defend and which community to defend. There is that argument of, in terms of the protest, freedom of expression against, offence. There is a very fine line, and I think that's why the government intervened, because the school were being intimidated, the staff felt threatened, and I think they were right to ban those protests. Some may say they also had the right to protest, and I agree. We all have the right to protest. This is the beauty of this country. It allows you to freely express yourself. So that just basically upholds this entire discussion, that people have the right to express themselves. I don't have to believe in something to tolerate and respect it. There are plenty of people, that I know that I've come across who, at the end of the day, I don't care who they love or who they are with. At the end of the day, if they're good people and they treat everybody with respect, to me, that's all that matters. And in the sense of religious communities, obviously it is a complex issue. And I'm not saying that parents don't have the right to have their concerns. All I'm saying is, do it in a dignified and informed manner. And I think, if you have these discussions or have events around this, always invite somebody from the opposing side. And that could work both ways. If there are people from the LGBT community who have concerns about religious groups, they should also engage in conversation with them and say, what are your views? This is my view. What do you think?
Let's bring Kurtan back in this. What are your thoughts to what Aya's been saying there?
I do agree to some extent. It is all about respecting. Respect is a very, it's a term that people kind of tend to disregard nowadays. They feel like, just because there is a group there, just because you don't agree with what they do, what they believe in, doesn't mean you shouldn't respect them. They are there. And I fully agree. What the government is doing is just trying to bring about the awareness, right? That there are these types of people. This is going on today.
What does Hinduism teach about LGBT rights?
Hinduism, in Hindu texts, the ancient texts, there is practically no mention of it, because Hinduism doesn't see it to be an issue of any sort, because we believe that, look, no matter who you are, inside you are the soul, you are the Atma, and that doesn't affect your worship of God. It doesn't matter what type of sexuality you are, what type of relationship you want to have, you're still able to worship God. And that's
but then you also said you didn't want this to be taught in schools.
Not taught in schools in that way. It means that parents should be given the choice whether or not they want their kids to be taught it. So say it is a curriculum, and I think it is good to have it in the curriculum to bring that awareness. But say the parents feel that we don't want our kids to learn about this, then they should be given the choice to exclude their kids just from those particular lessons. They shouldn't be told, no, you have to have your kids in this and they have to be taught this.
From what from conversations I've come across, I think for a lot of people, parents, it's the age.
Yeah.
I think that's the
and
main
I was
argument.
there. I was there. We did a live programme from there. I spoke to protesters, spoke to people on both sides, and that was one of the issues that was actually mentioned as well. But, we could spend a long time talking about this school and what's going on in Birmingham and whether this should be taught or not. But also what I want to talk about as well is whether this is something that makes you look into your faith a little bit more, and also whether there is this contrast between religious rights and also laws of the land as well. What are your thoughts to that, Imtiaz? I mean, have such incidents in the past made you reevaluate your faith? Do you have any sympathy with people who feel religious beliefs that they might have may be infringed by laws that are in place in the land?
I'll tell you a story I haven't really talked about on the air. So I grew up in a really anti-Muslim school. I was Muslim growing up, and two of my friends would be called a word that's derogatory towards gay people. They weren't gay. I didn't know they were gay. They didn't say it to anyone. Later on, I found out they were gay, and they used to get stuff thrown at them. And I thought later on, as a Muslim, I was like, if I have any issue with them, I'm exactly the same as the kids that would throw stuff at them. And that made me think. I'm not saying it changed my religious views, but it really made me think. And I think we're a bit cynical when we give so much credibility to these mobs outside of the school, a bit like what Aya was saying. Like, religious communities, especially the young people, are moving very fast ahead. I really am quite optimistic in this country about what I'm seeing, which surprises people.
That's interesting. I want to actually put that out there. Imtiaz here, someone who now isn't practicing a faith at all, founded Faith to Faithless, actually thinks religions are moving fast ahead. I know a lot of people think actually religion's stuck in the past. What are your thoughts? 81869. Anyway, I just want to put that out there, but Imtiaz, I know you want to
specifically, I mean, like, especially like young people, because young people are growing up with gay friends. I know so many young Muslim women, for example, wearing hijab, who've got like a gay friend, and it's like they're the ones who stand there with their gay friends against homophobia, and people don't know what to make of it, because you're dealing with someone who's symbolically wearing hijab, who's also like pro-LGBT. How do you deal with that? And I think the Muslim communities, the conservative elements, are just as much, they don't know what to do, as some of the government people, and I think this is going to become a much bigger thing if you look over the next couple of years.
Well, I want to bring Kirtan in on this for a moment, to talk about it from the Hindu perspective, but Aya, is that something that you've noticed, what Imtiaz is saying there about this sort of dichotomy?
I do agree, yes. I think the younger generation, obviously I grew up here, so I'm more understanding and I suppose tolerant of that. That's not to say that the older generation can't be, but I would also just like to say, I think obviously there are communities or people or individuals who don't come from religious affiliations who are also protesting this, and I think there are also concerns in the Jewish and the Christian communities. I think unfortunately the reason that the Muslim community is on the map with this is because of what happened in Birmingham, but we do also have to be aware that's just a fraction of what's
indeed
happening.
And there was this panorama out this week where it actually talked about Catholics and also a Jewish community as well. But the question I want to ask you, Aya, is how do you and other people marry up this difference then of what Imtiaz is talking about, being able to have gay friends, so to speak, whilst others in the community will say this is something that is a sin?
So for me, there's something called the akhlaq of deen, and that just literally means the mannerism of religion. And for me, that comes above, in the sense of discriminating against somebody for their sexual orientation or their race, which to me are characteristics of an individual. So racism to me is not any different to homophobia, because prejudice is prejudice. So for me, that triumphs, that comes above everything. So Islamically, and the Islamic perspective is that this triumphs, how you treat people, regardless of what you believe.
But then there's other people who for example, this text here, just come in and say, why should we change when in some religious texts it says being gay is a sin, I will never support teaching this. You then also have people who have that perspective on this. Yeah,
no, nobody is, I'm not here, of course, speaking on behalf of
of course not.
entire Muslim community yet, nor am I a scholar.
Community leader.
But I would respond to that, if that individual is talking about generally homophobia, then I agree. I don't think that they should change because of religion. Religion at the end of the day for many is a choice. So, if you don't believe in what that religion is saying, you are free to not follow that religion. I personally believe in the religion, and this aspect is a very small part of the entire religion.
Let me read a couple more messages out. Another one saying Islam is a religion, LGBT isn't. And a WhatsApp saying, hi Casa, such a shame as being an LGBTQ person myself. Back in my time at school, we were never taught anything of this nature. I really wish it would have been part of the curriculum, as it may have given acceptance to children who are affected by bullying. Religion isn't the issue. It's just a cover-up to social, cultural taboos. Sad that religion's always blamed. Thank you for that message. Kirtan, I want to come to you on this. On that point exactly, regardless of whether you are Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, whatever it is, religion is something that's all constantly being used as a, religion so in the past. It needs to become progressive. What are your thoughts on this?
I do feel like religion does get quite a lot of slack for things that happen nowadays, because something that happens socially and culturally, the first finger that's pointed is towards religion. Religion was set in stone God knows how many years ago, right? In ancient texts, for any religion, right? Any religion's religion, the philosophy itself has been formed or set in stone thousands and thousands of years ago.
What, for Hindu, for Christianity, we know the date. For Islam, 6th century. but that's that. But yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So it's been set in stone. So it's not like you can blame that for anything that's happening today. The world is changing, culture's changing, religion's not changing.
Is that the problem, though?
I can give you a Hindu example. So in Hinduism, we have two types of texts. We have something called the Shruti, which is basically our philosophy, is what we call our siddhant. It's what tells us, all right, this is what we believe in, right? From a spiritual perspective, from a godly perspective. And then we have something called the Smriti, which is the code of conduct. Code of conduct is what changes as time goes on. Mm-hmm. So what people tend to confuse, and I don't know if this is the same in any other religion, but what people tend to confuse is that religion's not adapting to modern times, but it's not religion that's supposed to adapt. Your philosophy and your beliefs are not supposed to adapt.
Let me put that out there to listeners, and I know you put your hand up there. You don't need to do that here. It's not school, but I will come to you in a moment. But I want to put that to listeners as well. I've got about 5 minutes or so. Do religions need to adapt for the modern age, or is that something that shouldn't be the case, as Kirtan says? Aya, and then Imtiaz.
So I'll give you a good example for that question, should religions adapt? So, for example, there's the advancement of science, there's the advancement of technology, things that didn't exist in the time of, for example, my faith, for obvious reasons. So for me, religion isn't about changing, but religion is about adapting without changing the religion. And I'll give you an example of that. Something like, for example, organ donation. That's a very current topic because next year the law will be changed where it's an opt-out system. Now, back in the day, 1,400 years ago, that science was not developed enough to do that. That did not exist. So that's a very modern thing at the moment. So how Islam works for me anyway is that there are scholars who look into this. For example, this topic, and see how it fits in with the text. That's not to say that they're changing their religion, but that is adapting with the times.
But that is open to interpretation.
It's open to interpretation, definitely, but in the sense that that's how faiths can adapt or look into modern debates, modern issues without having to change. So I think that's a good medium. And just on that, for example, there is a lot of debate around whether mosques or churches or synagogues, for example, should carry out same-sex marriage. And I think just as, I think in that sense, I think that should be a choice.
Well, let's put that out there as well. Should LGBTQ rights campaigns be given a platform in places of worship? Should same-sex marriages, or nikahs, whatever, should they be allowed in places of worship as well? 81869. Imtiaz.
Although I do think that religion has an impact on this LGBT No Outsiders program stuff and all this that's coming out. For me, I'm not interested in that almost. I'm interested in the bigotry. It's very simple for me.
Yeah.
Whether this applies to people wanting to pull their kids out of classes on Islam or whether it applies to people wanting to learn about the fact that gay people even exist. It's the same thing. It's this kind of, this idea that I don't agree with this, therefore I'm going to pull my kids out and not have them understand something about the world. I don't agree with that. I think that we live in a pretty integrated world right now. We've seen what happens when we pull kids out of things. We see how it's led to so much far-right extremism in recent times when people are completely disintegrated and sort of they think that immigrants are the problem. We don't want that. And why is it that, the same minorities, when we see something that we should be, we fought for a long time, and then suddenly it applies to another minority.
So it's ignorance. But what about people who say, well, religion needs to catch up or become more progressive?
I think I don't have any trust in scholarship to catch up. I have trust in the young people and even the parents who have kids who are LGBT who do eventually, in many cases, accept their kids. I actually believe in them and their humanity more sometimes than I believe in the scholars in Al-Azhar in Egypt or whoever,
Kirtan, what are your thoughts?
With regards to what you said, I do feel it's good that they are taught about this stuff in school. Definitely.
And what about what Aya was saying about same-sex, having that platform in place of worship as well?
To be very honest, it's something that's, for me, it's a grey area. It's a big grey area because you could allow it, you could not allow it. There's so many different permutations and things that could go right or go wrong if you were to open it up. open up a platform.
Isn't that part of the problem, though? Go on.
I think there is a risk if government tries to push on top of religious institutions that you'll actually make the problem worse in that sense. What I would love is for religious institutions, which are mostly charities and therefore take our money as taxpayers, to not discriminate. Whether they teach it or not, honestly, I think should be up to them. But as long as they don't discriminate, so in some of the, and this is not linked to just Islam. Like Catholic schools are notorious for LGBT, issues. If you've got a kid who's joined that school and they're gay, if they discriminate on the kid, they should be fined or whatever. Should they be teaching LGBT stuff at churches? I think it's up to them.
Yeah, I think it's a choice because then, just how where it's almost pushing, saying, this religion has to change because it can work the other way because, that's like telling an LGBT campaigner, no, you have to believe in what my religion says. So it's, I think just, people are free to think what they want and do what they want. Or, for me, it's quite simple. Just be respectful and tolerant to each other.
It is a fair point there. But let me just finish your point, Kirtan, if you don't mind, because you said it could be a danger as well. What did you mean?
It depends on individual people who practice that religion. It depends on what their views are as well. Not everyone's views are the same. So there are going to be some people who may not be on the same page as, an institution that wants to create that platform. Some people may be. So it's about trying to keep the majority of people as happy as possible.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely having you all on the programme today. That's all we've got time for, though.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to all my guests and everyone who's got in touch. But on the What's God Got to Do With It panel, we had Imtiaz Shams, founder of Faith to Faithless. We also had Kirtan Chag, a devout Hindu. And also we had Aya Badawi, a practising Muslim as well. That's all we've got time for today. I'll be back tomorrow where we've got...